Now that we have interval notation under our belts, let's go back and try to do some more examples of describing the domain and range of some functions. So in this function right here, this is more like the ones we saw originally, where it was just a table of values. Okay, so again, I'm not saying all the numbers from -5 to 5, it's just these specific inputs right here. So for this one, the domain is the set of numbers -5, -3, -1, 0, 3, and 5. The range, again, it's not all the numbers here, or well, it is all the numbers there. It's not all the numbers from something to something else, it's just these specific guys on this side. So let's see, I've got -7, I've got -2, I've got 6, I'm not going to write -2 again, I've got 5, and I don't need to write -7 again. Okay, so this is kind of the old way of writing domain and range. If it's just a specific set of numbers, you just write those numbers. If, on the other hand, it's something like a function y equals, or maybe a graph like this, then what we're going to do instead is describe what is the chunk of values that gets used here. So let's start with the domain of this function. That would be all the x values. When we look at a graph and we're trying to decide what the domain is, what I want you to think about is imagine that this entire graph is made out of yarn. Okay, so take all that yarn and squish it down to the x-axis. Okay, so if I squished all this graph down to the x-axis, let's look at what chunk of the number line it would cover. Okay, so if you imagine squishing this down to the x-axis, it's all the stuff from -2 to 2. And I just need to decide, do I include -2? Well, that's a filled-in circle, so yes. Do I include 2? Okay, that's also a filled-in circle, so yes. So now, this is more like the number line notation that we were seeing before. So all the numbers from -2 to 2, including those endpoints. So that's -2 to 2, and because I'm including the endpoints, I use brackets. Now the range, on the other hand, is a set of all the outputs, or in other words, the set of all the y values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole graph, as if it's made out of yarn, and squish it in to the y-axis to see what coordinates I hit. Okay, so if I squish that into the y-axis, let me do this in blue. I would hit all the points from down there, all the way up to up here. So the lowest y-coordinate I hit is -3, and because that's a filled-in circle, I do include that point. The highest y-coordinate I hit is +3. So all the numbers from -3 to 3, including the endpoints, -3 to 3. Okay, so domain, squish down to the x-axis and see what you hit. Range, squish down to the y-axis and see what you hit. Same process every time. So just to reinforce that, I want you guys to go ahead and pause the video, see if you can figure out the domain and range of this function down here. So go ahead and give it a try. So let's start with the domain. Like I advised, I want you to think about taking the whole graph and squishing it down to the x-axis, thinking about what I hit. So I start at -1, and then I hit everything to the right of that. Because there's no sort of dot saying that the graph stops here, the graph just keeps going forever to the right. So when we keep going forever, you're going to mark that with an infinity. It keeps going to infinity. On the other hand, it starts at -1, but does not include -1. So that's my domain, all the numbers from -1 to infinity, and oh yeah, don't include -1. My range, on the other hand, is if I squish the whole graph onto the y-axis. If I do that, the lowest y-coordinate I hit is 0. And then I include everything above that. It's going to keep going up forever. So it's all the numbers from 0 to infinity. I'm not including 0, and you can't actually hit infinity. So that's our domain and range there. So again, all the numbers from -1 to infinity are the x values. All the numbers from 0 to infinity are the y values, and we just always have to be careful about whether or not to include the endpoints.